Hi, friends, and welcome back to Elevate with Erica. So, last week I shared an episode where we talked about basically how what doing more kind of cost me what I wanted most, and how I was working to clear the clutter in my life for 2026 to open myself up to more. And the response to that one, honestly, it just meant so much to me to connect with you guys over that, to hear you guys comment on my social media promotion of it, how you could relate. And it told me something really important. It told me that a lot of you are feeling the weight of carrying too much too often for too long. And maybe you have also found yourself just saying yes too much. An awareness, though, is only that first step. So I feel like that's what we collectively did in episode one. We became aware of it, right? And we owned it. But once you realize that doing more is costing you what you actually want, then the next question becomes, what do I do with that information, right? And that's what today's episode is going to be about. And I just want to share something with you because I had already planned the topic for this episode before I listened to another podcast this morning while I was getting ready for my day. I love the Empower Her podcast led by Keisha. She actually went on I think it might have been like a 6 month break with that podcast, but it returned in like December. And it was so interesting to hear her talk about how she had gone through a lot of grief from miscarriages. And so experiencing loss and found herself saying yes to a lot of things so that she wouldn't have to deal with that grief. And like, I was like, I just had a moment where I was like, yes, that is what I can relate to. That's kind of where I found myself last year and recognizing that I had said yes to all of these things that I could do because I was trying to fill up all of my time, energy, space with doing things so that I didn't have to deal with the aftermath of the trials and tribulations that I felt in my life in 2023 and 2024. So I just filled up my schedule. So maybe that is relatable to some of you as well. So let's go right into today's episode. Not just recognizing the clutter in your life, but learning how to clear it in a way that creates space for God's actually move, restore, redirect, and bring you back to life, right? So, when I say clutter, I want to be clear. I'm not just talking about your closet or your calendar, which, by the way, I cleared out my closet. I actually did, get rid of physical clutter, and it feels so good to walk in there now. I had two of the giant trash bags full, one full of actual trash, one full of going right to the donation center. But I'm also talking about emotional clutter and mental clutter and spiritual clutter, relational clutter, and yes, that physical clutter too. Maybe you need to clean out your closet as well. I'm not judging. Mine was embarrassing. Most of us aren't overwhelmed, right? We're not overwhelmed because we're doing bad things. We might be feeling a sense of overwhelm because we're carrying too many things that no longer belong in this season of our life, right? Just because you can do it all doesn't mean that you have to do it all. You know what I mean? Um, Clutter isn't just stuff, right? Clutter is commitments that drain you, but you keep out of obligation. Expectations that you never agreed to, but somehow adopted, right? Roles that you've outgrown, but are afraid to release. Habits that once helped you survive, but now keep you stuck, right? Because the habits that got you here aren't going to get you to where you want to go, right? Maybe it's thought patterns that are exhausting to you. Maybe it's relationships that confuse you, an emotional weight that you've normalized carrying. Clutter is anything that crowds your life so much that you can't breathe clearly, hear God clearly, or enjoy your life fully. That's where I found myself last summer, and that is what me made me for the first time in my life seek therapy at the age of 39. And that wasn't an easy decision for me because I've always been a very hard shell. I try to put on this hard front. I can figure it out. I resisted personal development for 3 years. Once it was introduced to me, I resisted it for 3 years before I was actually like, fine, I'll push play on this podcast because I'm doing my hair anyway and I've got time to kill. Nothing else is in between going on in between my ears right now, right? So, like, that's how I finally gave in. And then those podcasts changed my life and the whole approach to my day. That led to me finding personal development books, right? So here's the part that changed everything for me. Not everything heavy is yours to carry, and not everything familiar is meant to stay. So let's talk about that. How do you know when it's time to release something? This is the part that most people struggle with. And I know I can speak for myself. This is what was hard for me because I don't want it to look like I'm quitting something. I don't want to be perceived as a quitter. We don't want to be irresponsible. We don't want to quit too easily. We don't want to regret quitting, right? We don't want to be selfish. We don't want to seem selfish. But there's a difference between being faithful and being overloaded. So, here are a few questions that have helped me start discerning what needs to go for this year and what gets to stay for this year. And I'm going to try this on for size, right? These are some questions. Does this bring me life, or does it just keep me busy? Second question, does this align with who God is shaping me into or who I used to be? Am I doing this because I feel called or because I feel guilty? If I stopped doing this, would I feel peace or panic? Am I afraid to let this go because it's wrong or because it's familiar? And sometimes the reason that we can't release something isn't because it's right for us. It's because it's comfortable. It's what we know, right? It's predictable and it makes us feel needed. And being needed is not the same as being called. So let's talk about proving versus avoiding versus purpose, all right? Because this was a big one for me. And I think it will resonate with a lot of you because sometimes we're not just busy, we're busy for a reason. And there are three patterns that I see all the time, okay? So we might be busy because we're proving. This is when we do too much because we're trying to earn our worth. We overperform, we overcommit, we say yes when we want to say no. I am so guilty of this. This is why if you're watching this on YouTube, I can't help but smile because, this is totally me, okay? Because somewhere along the way, we started believing that being valuable meant exhausting ourselves. Maybe we're busy because we're avoiding. This is when we stay busy so that we don't have to feel, right? This is where I found myself in 2025 because I didn't want to fully feel. I was trying to get away from how 2023 and 2024 left me feeling. I was tired of feeling it, right? Like I didn't want to cry anymore. I didn't want to sulk anymore. I didn't want to sing woe is me anymore. So I stayed busy so that I didn't have to feel instead of processing those things in a healthy way, right? So we fill silence so that we don't have to listen, right? Have you ever heard of that where some people always have to have something going on? They don't know how to just sit in silence with their thoughts. There's got to be music going, a podcast going, like they got to be talking. They just can't be silent. Sometimes that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, and maybe that's you. We distract ourselves so we don't have to process, right? That's kind of how I said I was in 2025. We keep moving so that we don't have to heal, right? Another one I can totally relate to. Or maybe you're busy because there's purpose, right? And purpose looks different. Purpose feels steady and not frantic. It flows, right? It feels good. Just thinking about things that I do that align with my purpose, like immediately my shoulders go down and I get goosebumps. It feels aligned, not pressured. It's rooted in obedience, not applause, peace over pressure, and clarity over chaos, right? So sometimes we don't need more discipline. We need more honesty about why we're doing what we're doing. So that's really the inner work that I have been doing in 2026. And I want to bring you guys along with me in this journey. So let's talk about clearing emotional and mental clutter, right? That's the clutter that we don't see, but we feel the most. That's the clutter that is coming out in all of that self talk, the negative things we're saying to ourselves throughout the day, right? A lot of that is from that emotional and mental clutter that we can't see. So, emotional clutter looks like resentment you never processed, forgiveness that you keep postponing, and it's only hurting you now. It's not bothering them a bit, right? Disappointment that you buried instead of healed, bitterness that you learned to live with, and stories that you keep replaying in your mind. I am so guilty of that. Especially the ones that like pop in my head at 2 a.m. Um, that is why I'm so grateful for my natural sleep peptide restored because that helps me clear out the clear out those thoughts in the middle of the night. They don't keep me awake anymore. If you want more information on that, by the way, you can head to the link in my show notes on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. So let's get on to mental clutter though. So mental clutter looks like overthinking everything, rehearsing conversations that already happened. Does anyone else do this? There is nothing worse than waking up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, this is what I should have said. Or like just stepping out of the room from a conversation, leaving somewhere and being like, why didn't I say this? You know? And then you sit with that because now you feel ridiculous going back saying, and another thing, right? Like it's over now. But now you're rehearsing it, right? Or worrying about things that you can't control, assuming the worst. Any pessimists in here? Maybe reliving what hurt you? Oh boy. If I if I had a nickel for every time I relived experiences that hurt me at the end of 2023, I would be a billionaire today. So maybe that's you. Or maybe it's letting past pain keep narrating your present life. I feel so crazy that I like literally I'm like that's me too. But maybe this is you also and I'm not the only one with a hot mess mind, that I'm trying to sort through for 2026. But I definitely like have been guilty of letting past pain in my marriage continue to narrate how my marriage flows in present life. And that's not healthy, right? That's not leading me where I want to go. So, this is where I want to gently say something that might be hard but freeing to you. All right. There's a time in my life I would have rolled my eyes at this. So, if you're still in that stage, I get it. But when you refuse to release resentment, bitterness, or unforgiveness, the enemy doesn't just win once, he wins twice. Once through what happened to you, and again through what you carry forward because of it. Forgiveness doesn't excuse what happened. It doesn't mean it was okay. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It's not to excuse their actions, right? But it means that you're no longer allowing it to have authority over your peace, your joy, your future, and your calling. Forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. because carrying emotional clutter weighs down in your spirit in ways that no packed calendar ever could. You can't make room for what God wants to build if your heart is still full of what wounded you. This is what led me to therapy last summer because I had gone through so much hardship. And then God was giving me this amazing blessing of a man who was going to church and attending his men's group and attending the marriage conferences and really doing a lot of inner work on himself to be a better husband, and then giving me the blessing of this company, Make Wellness, that I helped co-found, that I never in my wildest dreams would have led to the life that I'm living today, to the career that I have today. And I wanted to enjoy those things, but I had no room. I was walking around with the weight of the prior 2 years. I was walking around with things from my childhood I didn't even fully embrace. And I couldn't make room for what God was trying to build in my life. My heart was only full of what wounded me. So let's talk about, what do you keep in your life, right? When you're going through this decluttering and you're opening up to, all right, I have some inner work. I have some, I need to have some tough love conversations with myself, and you're sorting through all this. Let's talk about what you're going to keep, because this is important. This episode is not about stripping your life down to nothing, right? It's about building a life that supports who you're becoming. So you keep what aligns with your values. You keep what produces peace, what strengthens your faith, what supports your health, what nurtures your marriage, your family, your calling, what gives life, not just takes energy. And that part, it can change from season to season. Like maybe what gave you life last year is kind of sucking your energy this year. That's okay. That thing had a season, it had a purpose in your life last year. It doesn't this year, and that is okay. So you keep what feels more like yourself today, not less, right? Because God doesn't ask us to release things just to be empty. He asks us to release things so that we can be filled with what's better, what's next, what's healthier, and more aligned with where He is taking us. So let's talk about making room for what God wants to do next, because here's something that I've learned the hard way. God doesn't force His way into crowded lives. He is waiting for space, space to speak to you, space to move, space to redirect, space to restore, space to bring clarity. Sometimes the miracle isn't in adding something new, it's in removing what no longer fits. And He's waiting for you to do that. Sometimes your breakthrough isn't ahead of you, it's underneath what you're still holding on to. So let's make this practical. Okay, so it's not just inspirational. Let's make this, if you've got more of a practical mind, let's make this more practical. Okay, here are a few simple ways to start creating space this week. All right, I want you to do a life inventory. Like, get out a notebook. I know you've got a million of them that you've never even finished cover to cover, right? So just grab one of them. And I want you to write two lists. I want you to write one list that is what drains me, what only takes my energy. And then the second list is going to be what gives me life. Okay. And be honest. Be so brutally honest with yourself. You don't have to show anyone. No judgment, just awareness, right? And then the second thing I want you to do is pick one thing to release or reduce, right? Not your whole life, just one thing. I want you to pick one thing to release or reduce. One commitment, one habit, one mindset, one pattern, one emotional weight. Small releases are going to create big movements, and I just want you to focus on one. And then I want you to replace, not just remove. That's the third thing. If you take something out, put something life-giving back in, right? So what are you doing in that time? Maybe it's more rest. Maybe it's more prayer. Maybe you're just sitting in silence. Like now you've got this space, right? Where you can talk to God, you can talk to your higher self. You're open now, right? Maybe it's more movement. Maybe it's more connection. And then the fourth thing, ask this daily question: God, what can I release today so I can receive what you have for me? You don't have to overhaul your entire life. You don't need a new personality. You don't need a new fancy 2026 planner. You need space. And space begins with a single decision to stop carrying what you were never meant to hold. Because when you make room, God moves. And when God moves, everything changes. Thank you guys so much for spending time with me today. If this episode spoke to you, please take time to go and rate this podcast, leave a rating and review. I'd also love for you to share it, tag me, or send it to someone who might need it too. If you tag it on your social media stories, please tag me also at Miss_Erica_Renee. And as always, keep elevating. Until next episode, friends.